This is the BBC Home Service. We're interrupting programs to make the following announcement. It is understood that in accordance with arrangements between the three great powers, an official announcement will be broadcast by the Prime Minister at 3 o'clock tomorrow. In view of this fact, tomorrow, Tuesday, will be treated as Victory in Europe Day.
After 6 long years, the war in Europe is finally over. The 8th of May 1945 is declared Victory in Europe Day, and spontaneous celebrations erupt throughout the world. Hello and welcome everyone, my name is Mr. Dilly. Now I have 3 hopes for you. The first is to give each of you watching kind of an overview of some of the events of World War II that affected people not just across our country, the UK, but also beyond as well. Secondly, to help you understand why we celebrate and commemorate VE Day. And lastly, to show you why these stories still matter and will always matter. The main part of today's show, which I'll be showing you soon, actually, is it's a special Mr. Dilly film where in parts I take on the roles of different people from the war, sharing their stories. In the film, you're also going to see some of the major events of World War II and what VE Day itself looked like to the people back in 1945. I mean, you saw some images earlier, but there's a few more within the film itself. The music, the crowds, the hope. But before we dive into the film, let's rewind a little and ask a little question ourselves. And the question is this: when did World War II really begin? Now, we often hear that World War II began when Germany invaded Poland and Britain then declared war in September 1939. And yes, that is obviously a very key moment. But let's take a quick look at what happened before 1939, the key events that paved the road to war. In 1919, after World War I ended, Germany, who lost the war, was punished in the Treaty of Versailles. They were forced to pay huge fines, over 6 billion in today's money, which ruined their economy and created deep anger and hardship, as many lost their jobs and homes. Meanwhile, in Russia, a revolution had taken place and a new leader, Joseph Stalin, took power. He brought in harsh rules and in 1928, massive 5-year plans to industrialize the Soviet Union, but with brutal punishments for anyone who didn't follow orders. Millions of people suffered under his control, but he also turned the country into a powerful force. In 1933, a man named Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany. He promised to make Germany strong again, but he used lies and hatred to get power. What he called the big lie. He blamed innocent people, especially Jewish communities, for Germany's problems. Then came the aggression. In 1935, Italy invaded Ethiopia. Its leader, Benito Mussolini, wanted to create a new Roman Empire. He used chemical weapons and bombed civilians. The world didn't stop him. In 1937, Japan invaded China, attacking cities and civilians. In the city of Nanjing, hundreds of thousands were killed in just weeks. Also in 1937, in Spain, a general named Francisco Franco wanted to take over. To help him, Germany and Italy sent planes to bomb the town of Guernica, the first ever air raid on civilians. It shocked the world. Artist Pablo Picasso painted the horror in his famous work Guernica as a powerful protest against war. In 1938, Germany took over Austria, then part of Czechoslovakia. World leaders gave in, hoping to avoid war. But Hitler wasn't going to stop. So now let's look at some of the events that happened next alongside the celebrations of VE Day in 1945. As for the next 25 minutes, we watch this film together. I hope that this film brings to life for you the people and some of the events of that time for you. And afterwards, we have some answers to some of your wonderful VE Day questions as we take a deeper dive into some of those areas that are brought up in the film. So hopefully enjoy and get a lot from this. Thank you.
Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday, the 8th of May. We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing Today is Victory in Europe Day. Advance Britannia. Long live the cause of freedom. God save the King.
Of course, I haven't been on leave long, and I'm at home with my wife and my kids, and on the wireless we hear Churchill saying that war had been over. And what's the first thing we all do? Well, the first thing we do is, the first thing everybody in the street does is turn all the lights on. Every single light in the house. Of course, we haven't been able to have them on for the whole duration of the war. My wife said to me, what are we going to do? I said, what do you mean, what are we going to do? We're going to go up to the West End. We're going to celebrate with everyone else. And of course, when we get there, we have to force our way through. There's thousands of people there, crowds all over the place. We've just been up in Piccadilly. There's cars beeping their horns, people climbing on the roofs of cars, climbing up lampposts, singing, and there's people flying flags everywhere, bunting everywhere. It's the most incredible sight. The war is finally over. We finally made it. Here we are in Whitehall. And we're waiting for the PM to arrive. Any minute now he's going to come on the balcony. And my friends, 6 years it's been, and we finished. We made it. We won.
You will now hear a statement by the Prime Minister.
I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning, the British Ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
Here we are in Whitehall in London, waiting for Churchill to make an appearance up there on the balcony, and wait, here he comes! Here he comes!
This is your victory. Victory of the cause of freedom is ever there. Everyone, man or woman, done their bit. Everyone has tried, done a bit. Neither the long years, nor the dangers, nor the fierce attacks of the enemy have in any way weakened the unbending resolve of the British nation. God bless you all.
Goodness me, what an occasion. What an occasion. We made it. We made it. 6 long years. 6 long years. I'm never going to forget it. God, it feels like the clouds are going to come down. This is for you, lads. This is for you. The fear of gas attacks and bombing of cities led to plans to move vulnerable civilians, including children, expectant mothers, disabled and elderly people, away from the cities to the relative safety of the countryside. The evacuation plans were named Operation Pied Piper and begun on Friday the 1st of September 1939, 2 days before war was officially declared. And by Sunday, the last of 3,750,000 adults and children had been evacuated. On the 8th of January 1940, the government introduced rationing to make sure everyone has their fair share of food. Each family had a ration book with coupons, and they had to register with a local shop and queue every week. As shortages increased, long queues became commonplace. To combat the shortages of food, the government encouraged people to grow vegetables in their own gardens and allotments, and many public parks were also used to grow food. The scheme was known as Dig for Victory.
This is the moment then we've all been waiting for. VE Day and the end of the fighting in Europe. It comes 11 months after the landings in Normandy. Both at home and at work, a nation has exploded with spontaneous and wonderful rejoicing for a great and wonderful deliverance. The great news ran through the land from London to Manchester, from Birmingham to Cardiff and Glasgow. In every town and village, big and small. And the true quality of Britain was seen in the manner of her rejoicing. Nationwide are the celebrations, with flags seen the length and breadth of Britain. For children, who for so many have known nothing else but war, this day must have seemed like entering into Never Never. 6 long years of hardship, danger, destruction, suffering and sacrifice, and the war in Europe has finally come to an end.
I am Major Major. I hope you like the tash. Now, ever since the war began, the government has received countless inquiries from men all over the kingdom who wish to do something for the defense of their country. Men who are currently engaged in positions and jobs and work vital for the running of our country, who wish to do something to defend our kingdom against our German foe. Well, now is your opportunity. We need large numbers of such men between the ages of 17 and 65. 17 and 65 who are not currently engaged in military service, who now wish to do something for the protection of our land. This is a part-time position, a volunteer position, and will not require you to live away from your homes. The name of the new force will be the Local Defense Volunteers.
Meine Arbeit für richtig hältst, ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt deine Stimme ab. Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingesetzt bin.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
To bring the stranded soldiers back to British shores, a daring rescue mission begins. Operation Dynamo. Hundreds of vessels cross the English Channel, from Navy destroyers to little ships, fishing boats, barges and yachts, all crewed by ordinary people. They make the perilous journey to the beaches of Dunkirk, and over 9 days, 338,226 British and French troops are rescued. But not all could leave. Around 40,000 soldiers, mostly French, with some British, stayed behind to defend the town and were captured so that others could escape.
Moved down to Buckingham Palace. The whole place is jam-packed with people right the way up until the palace walls. We're waiting for the royal family to come again. They made an appearance a few times up there on the balcony. King George and the Queen and the rest of them. We're waiting for them to come again. Everybody's singing "We Want the King" and singing. The place is going mad. Everyone's erupting in cheers and laughter and joy. And wait a minute. Here he comes again. It's the King, everybody. It's the King. Yeah!
In July 1940, Churchill set up the SOE, Special Operations Executive. His aim was to set Europe ablaze. 60 training camps were set up across the UK, and SOE agents, both men and women, went into enemy-held territory as spies to conduct espionage, sabotage, and reconnaissance. It was very dangerous work. 11,000 agents were trained in total. France had been conquered. A German invasion of Britain was imminent. For a successful land and sea attack, Hitler needed to first gain air supremacy. From July until October 1940, the RAF fought the German Air Force in a raging battle over the skies of southeast England. The pilots and crew were exhausted and stretched to the limits of their endurance, but continuing and winning was of desperate importance. With the RAF winning the Battle of Britain, Germany's attention turns towards forcing the people of Britain to surrender. The Blitz begins.
Here in the East End of London, things have got worse and worse. Especially in this area here in Bethnal Green and over in the docks. I work in a team of 6. We help keep the people here, much as we can, safe from the bombing raids. And as you know, there's a bombing raid every single night now. We help the people get to the safety of the public shelter, and my job is also to help the emergency services after a raid, and also to check for any damage and help get any people out that have been caught under the buildings and rubble and debris that's fallen down. Another important job of mine is to enforce the blackout. The blackout is very, very important. We can't have one slither of light coming up through any single window at night time. Any light coming up, the enemy can see it as they fly over. They know it's a city. Gives them a clue where to bomb, where to drop their bombs. So we've got to enforce the blackout. Remember, don't even strike a match at night time outside. No light whatsoever. No street lights, no car lights, no light coming from any source at all here under my watch. September the 7th, 1940. That's a date that will live with me for the rest of my life. All hell was let loose. My boy, my son, we'd had him evacuated at the start of the war, keep him safe from the bombing. But there weren't no bombs falling. The phony war, we called it. So we brought him back. No sooner we brought him back when the bombs did start falling from the sky. It was a lovely hot summer's day just a few weeks back, and we were all out making the most of the hot weather. Little did we know that just the other side of the channel, preparations were being made for the biggest attack on Britain since the bleeding Spanish Armada. We saw the planes coming from a distance. 1,000 of them must have been 20 miles wide. Fighters, bombers. Hundreds and hundreds of little blackbirds. And as we watched, we saw the bombs falling from the planes. Not one, two, hundreds and hundreds of tiny little black specks falling down. My boy, my son, he was frightened. So was I frightened, so was me, so was my wife. Over 9 hours, hundreds of tons of high explosive and fire-making incendiary bombs rained down upon us. We went inside our air raid shelter that the government had given us. Everybody who had a garden and air raid shelter, called an Anderson shelter, to erect in their gardens, just to keep them safe, try and keep them safe in the event of a raid. If you didn't have an Anderson shelter, didn't have a garden, you could have something called a Morrison shelter, just like a metal steel cage that you could put inside your living room. People use it as coffee tables, you could sleep inside them. If your house did fall down, it fell on top of the shelter, and hopefully you were kept safe inside. But there we were in the shelter. We put our coats on our heads just to try and deafen some of the noise coming down. Guns and the bombs just kept raining down, dreadful noises and crashes, and I peeked out. The sky was orange. Orange it was with fire. It just went on and on and on. Bang, bang, bang. The whole of the earth was shaking. I thought, oh God, When the silence finally gave the all clear, 4:30 a.m. the next day, thousands of us Londoners emerged from shelters to see scenes of just complete devastation and ruin. Homes, schools, workplaces, everything bashed down to the ground by the bombs. And maybe we were the lucky ones. Hundreds didn't live to see that morning. It was a long and terrifying night. And we've had many more since. We're not just here in London, over 16 major towns and cities across our nation have also endured nightly bombing raids. Birmingham to Belfast to Southampton, Portsmouth to Cardiff, many more. One of the worst cities I've heard is Coventry. One night the whole city's been knocked down to the ground and burnt through with incendiary bombs. The army has taken the battery in France. But the RAF stopped the Germans coming. They stopped an invasion of this country. So now, my friends, it's our turn. The turn of the British people. To prove our spirit. To prove our spirit in the face of the enemy. We're never going to give up. We're never going to surrender. Courage. Courage, my friends.
On the other side of the world, on the 7th December 1941, Japan attacks the largest American naval base in the Pacific, Pearl Harbor, in Hawaii. The next day, America declares war on both Japan and Germany. By January 1942, the first American troops start arriving in England.
Welcome to our V-Day street party. We've got trestle tables down there all the way down the street. We've got Union Jacks flying from all the lampposts. Bunting, it's a sight to behold. God bless you, God bless you. Me and my wife were in St Paul's Cathedral this morning. They got 10 services back to back. 3,000 people in each they were to celebrate the end of the war. Here we go. Cheers to you all, cheers. The pubs are going to stay open for weeks. Police are going to turn a blind eye. The one down here is running dry already, but good news, they got more on the way. Yay! What a day, what a day. We've seen it all here, we've seen it all. But a day of mixed feelings, celebration here, but mixed feelings here. So many of us, friends of mine, friends of ours, not just here in London where we live, all across the country, all across Europe, so many lost their lives. Here's to them. Here's to them.
To resupply Britain with troops and equipment, America sent convoys of ships across the Atlantic Ocean, but German submarines called U-boats tried to sink the ships. The fight for the control of the Atlantic Ocean is called the Battle of the Atlantic. The losses in the battle were staggering, but by the middle of 1943, the battle had finally begun to turn in the Allies' favour.
I've got to tell you something, apart from the mixed feelings, I'm glad there are a few things. I won't be needing this anymore. The bleeding gas mark, I've been taking that with me everywhere for the last 5.5 years. The government gave out 40 million of these things, thinking the Germans might drop, well, as well as bombs, but poisonous bombs on us, just like they did in World War I using over there. But luckily we never had to use it, so be saying goodbye to that little beauty. Also over here, my daughter, she got evacuated at the beginning of the war. This is her evacuation case. Horrible times, never got hold of her. She was gone for months, staying away from her by letters. So, saying goodbye to that as well. And I'd like to be saying goodbye to this me ration book, but apparently ration is going to be here with us for some time yet. But not to worry, my friends. Happy days, days of celebration. This is a big, big cheer again. Big, big cheer. The children are playing around us, telling jokes. We're singing, the war is over. Peace is here for the first time in years. Cheers! Lisa Mama Brown! Lisa Mama Brown! La 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 la! Lisa Mama Brown! Cheers!
D-Day, the 6th of June 1944. The beginning of the Allied forces' liberation of Europe from Nazi Germany occupation. Over 156,000 Allied soldiers from the USA, Britain, Canada and other countries land on the beaches of Normandy in France. Codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno and Sword. Named Operation Overlord, it is the biggest land, sea and air invasion in history. It was a turning point in the war, leading to the eventual liberation of Europe.
It is hard to believe the war is over. Victory has cost so much, and so many have given their lives, and so many have left home to risk everything for their country. So let us not forget, amidst all the street parties and rejoicing, those who will not come back. Let us remember the debt we owe to all the men and women in the services who have laid down their lives, not just from Britain, but from the Commonwealth, Europe, North America and beyond. The war was won by a powerful, universal and global effort. We prevailed because we were united. And let us not forget, for a moment, that whilst the war with Germany has been won, the war is far from over. Our toils and efforts must now be turned to the cruel enemy of Japan, which is still yet to be defeated. We are living in the midst of great events. We know that in the days when war seems remote and far away, these will be historic pictures. They will commemorate those who did so much, those who sacrificed all, so future generations could live lives of freedom. And they will tell these generations how Britain, the Commonwealth, and its allies celebrated on the 8th of May 1945, Victory in Europe Day.
What you've just seen shows what people just like you and just like me went through. Ordinary people facing, I suppose there's a too light a word, extraordinary challenges. And in showing some of those events of World War II, I hope it shows you just some of the sacrifices they made, the unbelievable courage they showed, and the choices they had to make that even shaped the world that we all live in today. And for many reasons, that's why remembering the war and remembering VE Day, telling these stories still matters, because they remind us not just of what happened, but why it happened, and possibly looking at some of the things happening in the world today, what can happen if we forget. So just to put something in perspective, and it was one of the last things you saw up there in the film, the end of the film, and it was some statistics about World War II. And it says it's estimated that around 70, possibly as many as 80 million people died in the war. That's an enormous number. And it's almost, it's impossible to imagine. So I'm going to try and get us to kind of picture what that number is. So let's do this. So I'm speaking to you now, and if I sat here speaking to you as I am now, and you listening to me and watching me, and I said to you that this event, this stream, wasn't going to end, and you couldn't get up and leave or go anywhere, couldn't get out of the classroom or wherever you're watching from, until I had said all 70 million of those names. And I'll be going pretty fast here. So say I'm saying one of those names every single second. Okay, so 70 million names, one name every single second. Here's a quick question for you. How long do you think this stream would go on for? And how long do you think you'd be sitting in your classroom for? If I was to say 70 million names, one name every second, how long? Well, to give you an idea of just how many people died and how large that number that is, I'll tell you. So where are we now? We're in May 2025. Okay. So maybe you thought, oh, we'd be here about a month. Okay. Well, you're wrong. Okay. So let's jump a few months. Let's go to, say, September 2025. You're still sitting in this classroom September 25. Okay. And I'm still reading that list. Okay. Let's go to this Christmas, December 2025. I'm still reading that list. You're still sitting in that classroom. Okay. So let's jump to May next year, May 2026. I'm still going. One name per second. You're still sitting in that classroom. Okay, let's go to September 2026. I'm still going. You're still sitting in that classroom. Let's go to Christmas 2026. So not this Christmas, next year. I'm still going. In fact, I wouldn't finish and have read the 70 millionth name until I get to May 2027. You'd be sitting in your seats in your classroom, no sleeping, no breaks, just name after name every second for 2 years. That's how many people died in World War II. How many lives were lost. And every single one of these people, they had a name, had a family, and they had a story. If we go up to 80 million, you can add another half a year or so to that as well. So it's quite an incredible thing, isn't it? And when we talk about history, we're not just talking about numbers. We are talking about people, real people like you, people like me, people like all your family just happen to be born then, and we are born now. And that's why it's so important we keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep remembering. So in a moment, I'm going to be answering some of your questions. Before I do, I'd like to expand briefly upon Russia in World War II. Known as the Soviet Union back then, because their involvement in World War II is a complicated journey. So let's have a quick look at Russia's involvement in World War II. Here we go. At the start of the war, the Soviet Union, Russia, signed a secret agreement with Nazi Germany called the Nazi-Soviet Pact in August 1939. The two countries promised not to fight each other and agreed to secretly divide parts of Eastern Europe between them. Just weeks later, in September 1939, Germany invaded Poland from the west and the Soviet Union invaded from the east. Then, in November 1939, the Soviet Union also invaded Finland in what became known as the Winter War. Finland fought back fiercely in freezing conditions. But in June 1941, everything changed. Hitler broke the pact, and as you'll have seen in the film, launched a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. It became one of the deadliest fronts of the entire war, with huge battles and terrible losses on both sides. So complicated for the Soviet Union and Russia there. And there's also implications for what happened after World War II with the Soviet Union as well, but that's a story for another time. However, despite their early actions, the Soviet Union became one of the key allied powers, fighting alongside Britain and the USA and all the other countries to defeat Nazi Germany, but at a huge cost. They lost more than 20 million people, the most of any country. But by the end, the Russians had pushed the Germans all the way back to Berlin, and we'll talk a bit more about that in just a moment. Before we do, let's go on to look at some of your questions. Okay, so we have some really good questions you sent in. Regretfully, I can't answer all of them, but I'm going to answer as many as I can. They kind of sort of dive a little bit more into some of the things we've already mentioned and give you a bit more detail about some other things as well. So before I do, just a reminder of what I said at the beginning. If you're able to share any class comments or photographs and put them on social media and tag in at Mr. Dilly Presents with hashtag VEDay80, or email them to me at mrdpresents@gmail.com. That would be brilliant. And again, it helps keep me keep giving events like this free to you when I can. So that's fantastic. Okay, so let's have a look at some of your questions. Brilliant question coming up first of all, and thank you very much for sending in to Toner Avenue Primary School, Tynan, where why did Germany surrender? Well, Germany surrendered mainly because it had lost the war on almost every front by 1945. By early 1945, in fact, British and American troops were moving in from the west after the events of D-Day, of course, and Soviet Russian forces were pushing in from the east. German cities were heavily bombed and their army was running out of supplies and soldiers, and Adolf Hitler had lost control. He died in April 1945. He took his own life, and the new German leaders realized they had no way to win. So that kind of gives you a very short answer to that question, but it was just overwhelming numbers, and Germany had outstretched itself too far, and its leadership had kind of imploded on itself for that. So thanks very much for your question at Toner Avenue Primary School. Next question, very good question, this one. Great Cosby Catholic Primary School, Year 6. Hello. How many British soldiers had to stay fighting until VJ Day in August 1945? Well, I'm going to answer that the actual number at the end, because that's a really, really good point. And it's mentioned about Japan and the war still going on in the film you just saw. So whilst May 1945, as we said, signaled the end of the war and the fighting in Europe, the Second World War wasn't over yet. So let's have a quick look at what was going on in Asia before I give you the numbers about how many people were still fighting after Victory in Europe Day in Asia and the Pacific. Here we go. In Asia and the Pacific, Japan was still fighting, and the war there was brutal, fought in jungles, mountains, and harsh conditions. For thousands of British, American, Australian, Indian, and other Allied troops, VE Day didn't mean they could go home, as the battle continued. It finally ended in August 1945, after 2 atomic bombs were dropped by the United States on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japan surrendered shortly after, and that brought the entire war to an end. On August the 15th, 1945, VJ Day, Victory over Japan Day, was declared, and the fighting could finally stop and the soldiers begin the journey home. So it gives you kind of an idea of that. So back to your question, Great Cosby Catholic Primary School, Year 6. How many British soldiers had to stay fighting until VJ Day in August 1945? Well, the British, Indian, Burmese, Nepali, and African forces led the fighting in Southeast Asia, while the Australian, the New Zealanders, the Pacific Islanders, and the Canadians, under the direction of the United States, fought their way across the Southwest and Central Pacific. But in answer to your question specifically, there were, it's huge numbers, 365,000 British and 1.5 million Commonwealth troops deployed, including the largest volunteer army in history, the Indian Army, of 2.5 million soldiers. However, by the time of VE Day, many had, of course, unfortunately, tragically lost their lives or been captured by the Japanese. So I hope that answers your question. Next one, question. Thank you very much for piercing class at Thaden Boyce Primary School, Essex. How did people in villages celebrate VE Day? Well, you've seen in the film with the scenes in London, and in cities and villages across Britain, VE Day was a moment, as you can imagine, of great joy, great relief, and great community and celebration, of course. Everyone had been affected. Everyone had been affected in some way. And it was a time to be thankful and to look ahead for hope. I've got a couple of pictures here to show you, actually. As you can see here, people decorated their streets with homemade flags and bunting, hung out Union Jacks, organised street parties. And even if they had very little food due to rationing still going on, they brought up tables and chairs, played music on old radio, sang, danced and shared what treats they could. And church bells also rang out for the first time in years. People gathered in village halls or on greens to listen to Winston Churchill's victory speech on the radio. But of course, there were also the moments of silence and real sad reflection. To remember those who hadn't come home or the ones that are on their way home but obviously seen and experienced things that you and me don't ever want to see or experience. But thanks very much for your question, Piercing class in Essex. Thank you very much. Here we've got another wonderful question from Lee Mount Academy in Halifax. How did people in 1945 across different countries celebrate VE Day differently? And what do those celebrations tell us about their experiences during World War II? It's a very, very good question, actually. So I will kind of answer it fairly briefly, but you get an idea. So people celebrated, of course, VE Day in their own way. And I guess those celebrations reflected the experiences their country had actually gone through. In Britain, as we've seen, there were, as we know, huge street parties, dancing, singing and cheering. After years of bombing and rationing, people were just so relieved and overjoyed. But also, as I said, very emotional from remembering those people that didn't come home. In France, especially in towns that had been occupied by Nazi forces, of course, France, as was all of Europe, was occupied by the Nazis. Very, very different. But people filled the streets waving flags, hugging soldiers. For them, VE Day meant freedom from occupation. In the United States, there were celebrations too, of course. But for many Americans, the war wasn't over yet because they were still fighting against the Japanese in the Pacific, as we can see many Commonwealth and British soldiers. So the mood for them for VE Day was more hopeful than final at that particular point. In Russia, as you've seen, the war there had been particularly brutal. Their losses were unimaginably huge. Their celebrations were proud, but also very solemn. Big military parades and quiet remembrance. These different celebrations, they show us what the war meant to each country and remind us that behind each celebration was a very long, very hard journey for every country in their own and in their collective way. So thank you very much for your question, Lee Mount Academy, Halifax. Another actual great question from Lee Mount Academy, Halifax. Yeah, you get 2 goes today. Here we go. So Lee Mount Academy, Halifax. Is VE Day nowadays celebrated across the world or just in Britain? Well, this kind of adds on to that. So the last question was kind of like how it was celebrated back at the time, but now how it's sort of celebrated now. So VE Day is mainly celebrated in Britain and other allied countries that, of course, fought in Europe during World War II, like France, United States, Canada, Australia. But the day is remembered differently in different countries. In Russia, for example, and many Eastern European countries, it's actually marked on May the 9th, not May the 8th. And that's because of the time difference when the surrender was signed in Berlin. So it's celebrated a day later in Russia and many of the Eastern European countries. In the USA, it's remembered as part of their wider World War II commemorations, but VJ Day, Victory over Japan, later in August was even bigger there for the reasons we spoke about earlier on. France and Belgium often hold memorials and parades, especially in towns that were occupied during the war. So while VE Day is not a worldwide holiday in like every single country, it's remembered in a huge number of countries, especially those who had soldiers and civilians that fought, suffered, died, and obviously then celebrated the end of the war in Europe. Right, now we've got a couple of other questions here as well, and one of them is quite interesting one over here. So here we go. James Ellerman Academy, Slough. What was it like in Slough? Well, for those of you who don't know, Slough's actually just sort of in the west of London. It's kind of a borough. It's kind of merged into London, but sort of a borough to the west of London. And it's kind of a big deal for me. I'm going to wrap this in with this question here as well, which is actually from St. John Fisher Catholic College, Newcastle under Lyme. Thanks for your question. Mr. Dilly, do you know of any of your family members who were around in the war? Do you know what they did? So this question and the James Ellerman Academy Slough question is important to me and linked together because my family history actually is in Slough, in fact. And when I was a boy, for my first few years, formative years, I was brought up in Slough. So when you ask the question from the St. John Fisher Catholic College, do you know what your family members who are around you in the war, do you know what they did? The answer to that is yes. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. So first of all, we've got a little picture over here. So this shows Slough's trading estate. And this was a vital hub of wartime industry. Factories operated day and night producing munitions and military equipment and essential components for the war effort. And one of those working tirelessly was a lady called Ada. And she was my grandmother. And she joined the ranks of women stepping into industrial roles. She worked in a munitions factory, building weapons and supplies for the war. Now, her husband, my granddad, who I didn't meet, he unfortunately died before I was born. He was called Alfred, but his second name was Edward, and everyone used to call him Ed. And he longed to serve in the armed forces, but he was unable to enlist due to he had a hearing disability. But he was still determined to do his bit. So Ed actually became an air raid warden, protecting his community during the Blitz. Now, Slough itself endured several bombings, especially in the early years of the war and in that main sort of Blitz period. And many homes, like my grandparents, Ada and Ed, had air raid shelters in their garden. And that old shelter, rusted and overgrown, I might, as a small kid, I remember it still stood years later. I just remember it, in the garden with all weeds growing around it. I had no idea what it was. And it's only as I got older, I kind of realized what it was. It's not there anymore. But I just remember that very fondly. So as well as the air raids and the blackouts and the rationing, my grandparents and the people of Slough, along with many other places, had to put up with the terrifying hum of doodle bugs. So what's a doodle bug? Well, I'll show you a picture. Here we have them here. Pretty terrifying things, huge actually. These were V1 rockets, Germany's flying bombs, and they're launched from, they started to be launched from about June 1944 on the people of Britain. They had a pulse jet engine, which made a distinctive buzzing or droning kind of noise, hence the name doodlebug or buzz bomb, as they were sometimes called. They traveled at incredible speed, about 400 miles per hour, and they carried these high explosive warheads. Now, my grandma, and I remember this, once told me she was cycling home from work when she heard a doodlebug overhead. And when the engines cut out, it meant it was about to literally just cut out and then would just fall from the sky. So I remember her saying she was pedaling faster and faster, a heart pounding, praying that the bomb wouldn't land on her. So, quite something there. I also remember as a kid, and this is obviously years and years after the war, she still kept all her ration books, and they were carefully bound up in elastic bands in her cupboard. I guess it was like a small bundle that held the weight of her own sacrifice and survival and pride at getting through those wartime years, I guess. So thank you very much, both of you, for those questions. History is alive as a live living thing. Someone once said we're only a handshake away from history, and that's very, very true. I remember my nan fondly. She was an incredibly kind, amazing woman and soul, and went through so much in her life, including the incredible difficulties of the war as well. So thanks very much for your questions there. Now, before we kind of close today, I've got a couple of final questions that kind of, three really, that kind of all link together, and they kind of help when we closing today's event. And the kind of questions that don't just help us learn about history, but they help us understand why it still and will always matter. So I'm going to run through who the questions are from and what they are. First one is from Auckland Primary School, East Ayrshire. On VE Day, what can we still learn about the Second World War? Thank you for your question. Hold that in your thought, that question, because we're going to be answering this and a kind of like great big melange at the end. Okay. This one is from various schools: Waddingham Primary, Gainsborough, Rangefield Primary, Bromley, St Michael's RCP, Bury, Halfpenny Lane Primary, Pontefract, and St John's Primary, Manchester. Why do we still learn about and celebrate VE Day? And perhaps the most important of all of these questions is from Finnegan Primary School, Belfast. How can children growing up 80 years after World War II continue to appreciate the sacrifices that were made during World War II? So I'm going to try and answer all those three questions in kind of one thing as we close today's show. So good quick reminder on VE Day, what can we still learn about the Second World War? Why do we still learn about and celebrate VE Day? And how many children growing up 80 years after World War II continue to appreciate the sacrifices that were made during World War II? So let me try and sort of sum all that up, really. Hopefully, much of what I've said and shown to you on this event today will answer those questions. But as we come to the end of this VE Day special, I hope that these closing thoughts will go some way to answer these questions a little more as we think about what we've seen and heard today. So we've learned about a world at war, the fear, the incredible fear. I can't imagine it. Can you? The courage and the choices that people had to make. And those choices, very, very difficult choices, not black and white, lots of areas of grey, very, very difficult. We've heard from real voices from the past. We've seen how ordinary people stood up in extraordinary times. We remembered and thought about the millions that were lost and the millions more, of course, who carried on and rebuilt and then obviously hoped for a better world. Yes, of course, the Second World War, there's no question about it. You can't hide from it. It's one of the darkest times in history and always will be. But I think it showed us something possibly more powerful. It shows us the power of community, the power of kindness and of ordinary people, as I said, doing extraordinary things. That even in the worst of times, people still chose to help, to hope, and to fight for something better. And one of the most precious things they fought for, of course, was freedom. Freedom. But let's be clear, that doesn't mean, freedom doesn't mean that basically, I can do whatever I want, however I want, whenever I want. Now, that's something else entirely. And as we've seen from today, that doesn't go down well. Now, freedom comes with, obviously, responsibilities. Real freedom means having the chance to live your life safely and fairly and helping to make sure others do at the same time. So it means about that. It means making good choices. It means standing up for others, but being kind and being fair to others, even if they're not like you. And also remembering the people that made those freedoms possible. Because freedom is a very, very fragile and precious thing. And it's something that we all have to look after together. It's incredibly fragile. So every time that you sitting there today act with respect, every time we include someone, every time we speak up for what's right, we're honoring those who came before us. Because I feel this, because learning about the past isn't just about looking back. It helps us understand how we can shape the future. It's something we can carry forward. And you and me, all of us are all part of that story. So I'd like to say once again, thank you for joining me today, for being curious, for listening, for remembering. Remember, stay curious, stay kind, have conversations, ask questions, and never forget that you, right now sitting there, you are part of the future that they hoped for. My name is Mr. Dilly, of course, and I leave you with these images from VE Day 1945. Thank you very much for joining me today, and it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from me. Happy VE Day. Take care. Thank you.
There'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover. Tomorrow, just you wait and see. There'll be long tomorrow, when the world is free. The shepherd will tend his sheep, the valley will bloom again, and Jimmy will go to sleep in his own little room again. There'll be bluebirds over the white cliffs of Dover. Tomorrow, just you wait.